Hi, my name is Jory, and I do sound for games. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have a recording studio in the San Francisco area, and I also have a sound design studio here in Oslo. I'm working with about 20% of the games industry in Norway now, which is pretty cool. I've been doing games for almost 17 years now, and have worked on probably a few titles you've heard of, like most recently Grim Fandango Remastered, Broken Age, The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, and then a lot of Norwegian games as well, like Among the Sleep and Through the Woods. I'm doing dialogue production on, and just a ton of others, Shadow Puppeteer. So I thought one of the fun ways to get started is to first, I want to know a little bit about who I'm speaking to, because I really have no idea what you guys are studying. I know we're in the informatics department, but you could be from everywhere and anywhere. So how many of you are doing video game development currently? A few. Okay. How many want to do video game development? Raise your hands high so I can see them. Awesome. So almost half. How many of you are programmers? How many of you are audio people? How many of the audio people are musicians? How many are sound designers? Okay. How many of you have worked in audio for games? None. Awesome. Almost none. One slight, almost. Any artists, like animators and whatnot? Okay. Level designers or game designers, things like that. Other. What's the other? So what didn't I yell out? So just yell it out to me. Yeah.
IT project manager.
Okay. That's very related to audio. IT project management. Anything else I missed in my very generic? Writers. Yeah. How many writers? Okay. What else did I miss? Philosophers. How many philosophers? Stand-up philosophers? Do you guys know the movie History of the World Part 1? Yeah, Mel Brooks plays a character who's a stand-up philosopher. He's in line waiting for his unemployment, and he gets to the front, and the woman says, "What do you do?" He says, "Stand-up philosopher," and she says, "Oh, you're a bullshit artist." So. I'm a very informal person, so feel free to ask questions at any time. So if there's something I covered too quickly or am not covering at all, and you think it's the right place, just ask, and I'll take a look at it. So I thought a fun place to start would be to look at what is the question of what is good sound design in games. So I brought a few examples of what is not good sound design in games. That's probably about enough of that. So what do you think is the first problem with the sound, and what made you laugh? What is wrong with the sound in this game? Just yell it out. What? The voice acting? Okay. Repetitive, yes, that is a key thing. What else? Yell it loud. So it sounds off. Well, okay. So the first thing is, don't worry about the timing on anything like sync, but it sounds off for the genre of the game, right? It doesn't sound like it matches. But probably the thing that makes you laugh the first and most is the repetitiveness and the inappropriateness of the sounds. They don't sound like somebody has just died. It sounds like you just like became a sheep when you hit the lava. It's very strange. I have no idea who did this, and it's very odd. I mean, it is a Nintendo DS game, so sure, it's got a very small footprint. You can't really ship a lot of stuff, but we used to ship a lot of better sounding things in games, so that were this small. I'm going to show you another example.
Crush them! Two enemy. All guns. Enemy unit 1.
So, what do you hear there? Electrical noise. What else do you hear? There's one thing in particular I hear that makes me just cringe every time I hear it. No, I mean, actually, you kind of have to, when you have a lot of explosions going on, that's going to happen. I mean, you're going to have ducking issues. What I hear is they have one explosion, and they play it about 100 times on top of each other, and so you get to hear this very repetitive sound, right? I give you a little example of why that, what happens when you do that. So I have a quick little example. So this is a very simple example of just a gunfire, okay? I'm just going to hit one gunfire. Sounds okay, right? Single shot pistol. But do you notice that it's the same sound every time, right? So you start noticing it very quickly. Human ears are very good at hearing patterns. So what happens if we repeat it really fast? It sounds really, really terrible, right? There's actually a lot of things we can do to avoid that terribleness. The first thing we can do is we can actually randomize the pitch of the sounds. Just one sound randomized. Sounds a lot better, but it's not perfect. You can still hear that there's one sound, really. But it's better. Now, what if we randomize with more than one sound? So in this case, I have 3 pistol sounds. They're very similar sounding if you listen to them each, but when they play together in rapid succession, you notice how we don't really get that weird echoey effect. Now, if we do both randomizing of pitch and sounds together, then we really get rid of that echoey effect entirely. Now, if we go back and we listen to that other example,
Crush them!
listen for the explosion. Right? If they'd shipped 3 sounds instead of 1, would have improved the sound completely. Okay, here's another fun example. So, apart from the hideous voice acting and the very strange sound design with it, is there anything that stands out as really, really strange in this one? Anyone? Yes. What do the footsteps sound like? They sound like typing on a keyboard. I don't think they're even that interesting. They sound like a typewriter. I'm going to play it again. Listen to it. They don't sound anything like footsteps. Anyway, it's very strange. I'm going to show you an example that by today's standards is considered really kind of lousy sounding, but for its day was actually quite remarkable. Everyone played Prince of Persia? But notice how repetitive the sounds are. So you notice you can hear the repetitiveness of all those footstep sounds. You can hear when the plates fall, they all sound exactly the same because there's only one sound delivered for each of those things. But at the time, that was pretty remarkable at all because really there weren't a lot of games with a lot of digitized sound in them. So it was pretty cool back then. Not so cool today. But this next example I'll show you, they should have known better. So how many seconds do you think any human is going to get before they turn the sound off? Even a 5-year-old is going to turn that sound off pretty much immediately because they have one sound for each thing, and it just sounds terrible. Did anybody play Flappy Bird? By contrast, I want to show you a couple of really good examples. The first one is a game called Mechanarium. Quite obviously, these are sounds you're going to be hearing for a little while, right? And I don't think there's a moment in this game that you think, I have to turn the sound off. In fact, when you play this game, you want to turn the sound on because the textures are so interesting, and they really add to the world. They help really make it a better place. I have another example that's really good, and this is a game where there's a lot of repeated actions. You hear the same actions a lot, but you don't hear the same sounds very often. It's very, very good at randomizing. So, have any of you played Don't Starve? Great game, right? How many of you played it with the sound off? Nobody, right? Because it's a great sounding game. I didn't work on it. It's just a great sounding game. But it's an example of where you do a lot of the same actions over and over and over and over and over again, and you never really stop collecting things, and you collect things all over the place, and the sounds, and you run around, and you hear the same stuff over and over again. It never gets tiring. It's actually really interesting. And then there's also interesting sound design choices like the flute and the using instruments, musical stuff for the dialogue to represent is pretty cool too. So I thought what we might do for a little bit of fun is go back to our terrible example, the first one, and actually try putting new sounds in it and hear what it sounds like if we replaced it with something that actually sounds appropriate. And I haven't really prepared anything for that. We're just going to do it live. You get to watch me sound design and run into all the fun that could happen, because I have no idea what we're going to use. Hey, look at that. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully it's going to stay online now. Alright, so I'm in Pro Tools, and I need to get my sound effects library. So I use a program called SoundMiner for sound effects library and stuff, finding all my sound library files. I've got about 400 gigs of sound effects that I've been collecting, many of which I've purchased, but about a quarter of that I've recorded myself with a little handheld recorder, a little $200 Zoom H2. Alright, so let's bring in our video. Alright, so you can see we have a video there. You're going to get to see lots of glitching in the software because I'm running under Yosemite and it's not really compatible. But there you can see. Sorry, it looks terrible, but it's a 3DS game. They generally look terrible. So, let's say we're going to start with something like this. The first thing I would probably do is try to make it feel like it's got some kind of ambiance, so we can feel like we're actually there. So let's get some lava, shall we? So one of the tricks I use for finding lava is I don't actually go looking for lava. I go looking for rivers or creeks. So let's see. So I can hear that, but let's hear it with a, what are you doing? What I can do is I can put an effect on that so I can hear it the way I might process it in the game, or before I make the sound effect. So let's say I only want to hear, I want to make this sound like lava. I'm going to roll off the high frequencies. Okay, and it seems to be doing absolutely nothing I ask it to do. Welcome to Yosemite. It is doing absolutely nothing. I guess what I'll do is I'll import some of this sound into here before we do anything. Transfer. Yeah. Great software. Get my video out of the way. See if maybe a plugin feels like working somewhere. It's working there. Let's see. Man, can we turn up the it's the tape in is the one you want to come up. There we go. Alright. We're getting a little buzz, but that's the audio system in here, so I apologize for that. So now we got a little bit of lava going. Alright, we could make that a little bigger on the bottom end. I don't know if we're going to hear it through these speakers. Let's try to sound a little more lava-like. Alright, so probably the next thing we need is... How about we... let's pretend this is a female character. I just recorded some female sounds earlier today. Norse women, yeah, Norse female. It was for a game being made by a company in the UK. So let's just import these since we're just gonna play around. I haven't edited any of this. This is just from this morning, so I haven't even heard any of this yet. So we've got things like... So we'll just use some of this for our battle lines. Already sounds better than it did, doesn't it? Might be a little large for that kick. The animations are pretty terrible, aren't they? At least it's not only the sound that was terrible. Is it just that speaker that's buzzing? It's because it's plugged in over there. It's a ground loop. Alright, so we'll pretend that these are all edited to sound really perfect. Well, already you get a lot more variety going on. Let's get some whooshes and stuff for, you know, swinging whatever it is she's swinging there. And we'll get some impacts as well. Yeah, those will work, right? This bug is fucking horrible. They feel a little large, don't they? So maybe what we should do is get rid of some of their low frequencies to make them feel not so large. Feels a little more appropriate for the distance and the size of the thing. Probably need some impacts for that, right? We'll send those over. Let's grab a few more. That one's too big. That one's good. These feel a bit large too, I would say. So maybe we'll copy that EQ over and see if we can make it feel a little smaller. So I think we can line those up with the whooshes. What do you think? Is it sounding a little more appropriate? So that creature probably needs to make some sound too, right? Now, normally I would work in a lot of different sessions. So I'd make all these punches, and then I'd make a copy of this, and I'd probably work on the creature sounds totally separately, because on a creature I probably have between 4 and 8 layers of sounds happening on every single thing they do. So I would just need a lot of room to be able to do things. But we'll just work here because we can. So let's see what... I'm not quite sure what that creature is. It looks kind of lizard-like, like a gigantic, Gila monster or something. So it probably should have kind of a little bit of a sliminess to it, maybe. Kind of scaly, not too goopy, but just a little slimy. Maybe it hisses a little. Probably has some kind of shrieky thing, but probably not too big. I don't know. Let's look for the slimy first. Yeah. Sometimes it really depends on where the game's at. If I can do it to the stuff that's in the game, that's usually better, because I really know what the hell's supposed to look like, and so long as it sounds, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was, do I use concept art when I'm working on this type of thing? Not often. Sometimes. It really just depends. So if that's all that's available, yes. I like to see the concept art when the game's still in production before I'm involved, but otherwise, it's better to work with the in-game stuff. Usually, what I'll do is I'll capture in-game footage, and I'll make sounds against the footage, and then I'll go put it all back into the game, sound by sound, and trigger it. So let's go look for a little bit of goopy, slimy stuff. This stuff sounds too big. Part of the fun is just looking for what it is you need. And you may not have it. You may have to go record it. Sometimes that's fun. Let's try some of this stuff. So maybe I'll use the goopy, slimy thing for when she's hitting him. That might actually, that might help us believe that she's really hitting this thing. Note that these are slimy footsteps that I'm grabbing. So I'm not using them for their intended purpose at all. So we probably need some kind of screamy thing for this creature, because it's attacking you. So it probably isn't very happy. Probably not very friendly. So let's go look at our animals and see what we can find. What kind of animal do you think would make a sound that this thing might sound like. What kind of animals make kind of short, high-pitched, squealy type sounds? Any idea? Sheep? Yeah, sheep might work. Actually, let me go. You know, I have some sheep, but they all have bells in them. I don't know if they're gonna work. What is the fox thing? This stuff might work. I just have to get rid of those bells. This is recorded up in Hamar. Yeah, let's take some of this. Let's see what I can do about those bells. Okay. Yay, software protection. I only own like 4 licenses to this software. Alright, maybe we won't use that. Sheep eating. I always slate things when I record them. Bet you never will think about sheep the same way again. These are all little babies, too. Let's put a... I'm going to put a high-pass filter on that, too, to get rid of the background noise. A colleague of mine was telling me I should upgrade to Yosemite yesterday. Yeah, I don't think so. So we probably still need some kind of scream for him. I mean, it's a good reaction. But we should probably have something else in there. What else have we got? Some of these make more noise. They're just so belly. Let's grab that and see what we can do with it. So we could use it just like that, or we could do other things with it. We could pitch it up. This is a very standard. So we could do that with a lot more of them. We probably need sounds when she falls in the lava, right? Better than the ones that sound like a goat already. Jesus, really? I thought about actually having somebody come up and record all these. I thought we would just shortcut it and use the stuff I already recorded. Look, female death. We have that. Not much. I mean, I use a lot of the same source material, but so how much do I reuse the sounds? I don't reuse, like if I made something for a project, I rarely reuse it, but I'll use the source material again. Vocalizations, I don't reuse them almost ever, because with actors you have to be careful. Let's go for I think that's a good one. This is what I spend my life listening to. You might think that. Out of context, you can do all kinds of interesting things with sound. Let's put this in the right place. It's a little long for there, but we'll just use it. Yeah, but the game respawns you so quickly. Lava? Well, it bubbles. And we have a bubbling sound already. It doesn't like attack you. I mean, their animations are so lousy that you just disappear when you hit the lava, so it's... Oh, absolutely. Alright, so let's hear... We have a stray sound sitting there. Bunch of stray sheep. Let's get rid of them. Anyway, you get an idea of how that works. Don't really have a whole lot of time to show you a lot more. Is there anything in specific anybody would like to see before I wrap up and take questions? Yeah. it should be about 10%. The budget on a game should, the 10% of the budget should be for sound, and depending on your music and your voice needs, those may be budgeted separately, and rightly so, depending on the actors you might hire for the voice. Because if you hire a bunch of big name Hollywood actors, it's going to cost considerably more than if you hire local actors who are usually quite good as well. Yeah, let's just switch to questions. So who's got questions? Yeah. Okay, so the next step would be, I'll show you, actually. I had planned on showing this, but didn't expect to have so many problems with display stuff and whatnot. So I'm going to save out of that. Now pretend I bounced all that stuff out. I was working on another project, and let's say I had bounced all that stuff out and I was ready to implement this. So I'm going to go into Unity. So let's say we're working on a Unity game. And so this is a game I'm just beginning on. Thank you, Unity. So I've actually got this pretty much already configured for the sound implementation. So the way it works I'm using an implementation engine called Fabric, which is middleware for Unity, and it's a third-party tool. So what I've set up is an audio manager that then is subcategorized into, in this case, music, sound effects, and dialogue. Assuming there's any dialogue in this game. I always just assume there might be, so I always create a component for it. So under music, we've got the music. This is what they put in, so it's all temp, and it just loops like that forever, and you want to kill yourself. And then in sound effects, I've got, again, the sounds that they have put in as temp. I haven't created any sounds. If we had time, I would go and show you how to create these sounds and then put them in the game. So here's the game over sound when you've screwed up. When you click on a button, and when you click on a piece to remove the piece from the game. There's actually 3, and it's randomizing between them. So depending on, every game is different. They all implement differently. They're all set up differently. I try to get people to kind of set things up pretty similarly to how I want it. Some games I will go in and actually write the code to get the implementation going. I usually like for them to just take an example I've given them that I've put up on GitHub that the developer can use as an example and model it after that, and then I can just jump in and start making sounds. So in this game, let's see, there are scripts, and let's see, in the game logic there would be move piece, and right here I've got this call to audio manager .play sound. I don't know if you guys can read that. I don't think I can zoom. It won't let me zoom right now for some reason. Because it's Yosemite. So it's playing a sound, and it's calling this event name. That event name was defined in the audio manager down here in this list. There's one here called SFX piece push. And so then when I've created piece push here, which is a random component, I've defined it with a listener here from the list of all the different events that I've created. So when you actually play the game, here I'll just run this game so you can see it. This is kind of a cool little reverse Tetris game. And I don't know if it's going to play the music. If it does, I apologize. Now it's going to play the music. Let's turn the music up, shall we? Yay! You can see I screwed up there. So it's just randomizing the sound that it's going to play. And I'll be replacing those. And then if I screw up, I lose. So those are all the temp sounds, but I went through yesterday and completely rewired all the audio engines so that I can start making sounds for it. Another question? What do I think about audio tools in Unity, the built-in stuff, and if I don't like it, what should you use? The answer is use anything. Wise, Fmod, or Fabric are my favorites. I use Fabric on pretty much everything I work on, but Fmod and Wise are fantastic tools as well. Unity 5 has the beginnings of a decent audio system, but it's going to be a while. It has a mixer. That's pretty much what it's got. So I recommend using a decent tool like Fabric, which is free for indie games under a certain budget. I think they're all free for indie games under a certain budget at this point, so there's no excuse not to use audio middleware. It will make your audio producer's job considerably easier. I'll give you an example of that. I'm working on a project right now where they have already gone through and wired up all the music and a bunch of temp sounds, and they've done it using the built-in Unity tools for audio. The way Unity does that, first off, they had to write their own code to randomize sounds, because Unity does not have any concept of randomization. You basically, if you want Unity to do all kinds of awesome, cool things that are visual, it does everything. All the bells and whistles. It's supported the Oculus since it was just an idea, but audio, well, we're still 20 years behind on that. So basic things like randomizing, it just doesn't do it without you having to write the code. Most developers have no idea they have to basically build the widgets from scratch to do that. So they just go in and they put these audio clips all over the scenes, and then I can't mix it because then I have to open up every scene and go and adjust every single audio clip wherever it might live, and make changes to the roll-offs and make changes to the levels of it. And if I want to change the sound, I would have to modify that sound clip or go find it and replace it with a different audio clip. It's a complete nightmare to work with. So if I go into here with my audio manager with Fabric, everything is in one place. If I want to change the audio clip, it's right here where it says game over. There's the audio clip. If I want to change the roll-off and change its properties, I can do that right here. If I want to do it across the board with all my sound effects for the whole game and change the roll-off for all of them, I can go to my SFX group component and make a change right here. Just change that to 10, 100, and I've just changed it for everything that's hierarchically below that doesn't have an override. So if you don't have things like this, it becomes a complete nightmare to be able to mix the game when you're done. But it also means that you have to write all the tools yourself to do really, really basic things like randomization. So I'm a big fan of Fabric. The guy who writes it, his name is Taz. The company is Tasman Audio. He's based in the UK. He was a sound designer for Disney, and he wrote Fabric in his spare time, which I'm sure he has absolutely none of, because every time I send him an email, no matter what time zone I'm in, I get an instantaneous response. So I like support like that. It's pretty awesome. Other questions? Yes? Where do I get my commercial libraries? So I've invested in things like Sound Ideas and Hollywood Edge, are two of the biggest sound effects library companies that have been around for a long, long time. There are a ton of options today. Because audio recording tools have become so ubiquitous and inexpensive, there are actually now a ton of companies that will allow sound people to sell their own libraries. So you could go looking for, let's say you needed sounds of a car that is from who knows where on the planet, and there might be somebody from that country who's gone out and recorded it and is selling a library set online. I haven't used any of those systems, any of those retail systems. Everything I've gotten has pretty much come on CDs, so I've had it for a while. Nowadays, most of these companies sell things on hard drives. There's a guy down in Australia named Stefan Schutze who his company is called Sound Librarian. They've got a ton of sound libraries that are really, really cool stuff. He's also the guy who knows everything about Fmod. So if you ever need Fmod help, he's the one to ask. So yeah, most of the commercial stuff is just I have purchased it or colleagues of mine we've gotten together and done it together. And then all the individual stuff that I like to record as much stuff as I can, and I try not to ship anything that comes straight out of a library if I can avoid it, unless they're not paying me. No, even then, I want it to sound original and clear, new. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're one of the places that is allowing people to resell their own sounds, their own libraries. Yeah, a guy named Tim McHugh is in charge of that. Other questions? Do I use a lot of time in post-production? Things I've recorded. What I generally do is I try not to think about them too much. I record things when I hear them and go, wow, that was cool, and I get whatever I can, and it sits on my recorder until I decide to empty it. And then, so I've slated everything when I start recording. I'll just, hold the recorder up, wild bird sounds next to so-and-such place. I'll just stand there for 5 minutes and record it. I often don't even listen to it when I'm recording it. I just, it's like I have a recorder in my backpack and I just carry it everywhere. So when I dump the stuff off of my hard drive or onto the hard drive, then what I'll do is I'll listen to the slates and I'll name the files and I'll gang them by the places I recorded them, and then I drop that into my sound effects library. And so I can go back into Sound Miner and so I've got this. There's a section here. Let's say I wanted to look for. Here's all stuff I recorded in Bergen, or Vatnahalsen train platform sounds. And, I know generally what I've recorded, but I can't always remember that I did record something. So. The Flomsbane. But you can see I don't actually go through and clean these things up. I just dump them in because I don't have time. And sometimes there's interesting stuff in there that you don't think is going to ever be useful. And you go, oh, I need the sound of those sheep, but not the bells. Or I need the sound of those bells and not the sheep. And using a tool like Isotope RX, I can actually go in and remove a lot of that stuff, which I would have demonstrated if RX had launched without a serial number. I could spend months being anal and cleaning it all up, but I just try to label it so I'll be able to find it again. And sometimes when I don't know what I'm looking for, if I'm like, I need a sound and I have no idea what it is that's going to fit here, I'll just walk through different sounds and see what strikes me. I have to say there's not a single sound I've ever heard in a dentist's office that I ever want to hear again, especially not in the game. Unless I'm trying to inflict terror into somebody's heart. Yeah, not sure. I mean, you could certainly ask the dentist to experiment. They love doing all kinds of things like that. I had a colleague who needed there was a molded cable, like this type of connector cable, and it was for a really expensive piece of video gear. This was about 25 years ago, and they had lost the original adapter, right? And so he had to buy a new one, and the company charged him $250 for something this big. But he looked at it and said, "There's got to be something weird on the inside. If I could only know what was inside this molded adapter, then I could make them myself." Right? So he went to his dentist and asked his dentist if he's X-ray it for him. And the dentist's like, "That's pretty nuts. Okay, sure, let's do it." And so he X-rayed it, and they were able to decode which resistors were put inside, because it was all analog electronics back then. And so he was able to build his own cables from then on. In fact, the dentist didn't even charge him. He thought it was so kooky. He was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do it." So, you never know what you can get a dentist to do. Of course, you'll probably, if you need the drilling sound, you better do it on your own teeth. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Do I take into consideration the devices and where the games will be played? Absolutely. I definitely think a lot about how somebody will listen to the work that I'm doing, especially if they're going to be playing it on like a mobile device, like a phone, or versus an iPad. I think people are more likely, although the statistics say that 75% of people play games on their phones with the sound on. I think people are more likely to listen or be willing to listen to the sound on the iPad than they are on their phone. Mostly because when the other person flushes next to you, you don't want them to know you're playing a game. But the different devices all have tiny or bigger speakers. If somebody's playing in their living room, they're going to have a radically different experience than if they're playing while sitting in the tebana, right? Or if they're sitting, in a bar and the sound is coming out the speaker built into the device, perhaps. So yeah, I like to test things directly on devices if I can. I generally like to test things on small speakers as well, just to double check. When I worked at LucasArts, we all had computer speakers on our desks, and we were supposed to use them. I hated using them, but I did test mixes on them because they sound totally different than nice studio monitors. So, and that's what people were using in those days. Definitely. Yeah. So, is it a question? Okay. Do I look for common inspiration in? Okay, so like if I can relate to the project in some way or to whatever they're inspired by, sure. I mean that certainly helps. I think generally you look at the project, you look at the artwork, you hear what they tell you about what they're thinking about, and then you deliver what you think sounds right. And they go, but that's not what this thing's supposed to sound like. And you say, well, you tell me, what does this thing sound like? And they say, but that's not what I imagined. I said, well, sit with it for a week and tell me what you think in a week or two. And usually they come back and say, that's what it sounds like. I can't imagine it sounding like anything else. So yeah, I mean, sometimes the artwork that they're inspired with will help. We don't always get access to that. I mean, quite often people just say, here's the game, make some sounds. Sometimes they just say, here's the videos of the game, make some sounds. Yeah. Do I like it or hate it when somebody says, I want something that sounds like this other game? It's nice for inspiration, because I can at least know what their taste is like. So if they're talking about a game that's got really over the top, incredibly unrealistic, hyper realistic, weapons and creatures and things that that just are enormous, and the style I was thinking was that it should be really meek and subdued, then that would be a major mismatch. And so it's good to know that what they want, so long as they don't say, give us the sounds from this game. That's when it sucks. I did a project a few years ago where the producer said, these are the musicians that we are inspired by for the music for this game. And I brought on a composer, and the composer started working with them, and over 5 weeks they kind of narrowed it down to the style that they were happy with. And then at the last second, the game's supposed to ship. It was a Facebook game. It was supposed to ship in about a week and a half. And they came to me and they said, we changed our mind. We don't like your composer. Can you get us another composer? Like, okay. So they told me what the stuff they had gotten to in terms of their inspiration. They were giving me all these pop musicians, like Keisha and things like that, right? And they gave me specific songs, and I turned around and I said I pulled on 5 composers, and I said, everybody just don't write anything new. Just give me something you have that's in this style. And one guy said to me, well, what's the style that they're looking for? Give me specific songs. So I gave him one of these Keisha songs as a reference, and he came back with basically a copy of that. He basically made one and sent it off to me, and I shipped all this stuff off to the client. They said, yep, that's the one we want. And then as soon as he changed it to not be infringing on the copyright, they said, well, we don't like it anymore. I'm like, well, do you want to license the original song? Well, no. It's like, okay, well. So it's a drag when they've got their heart set on something so specific that it has to basically be a ripoff. But it is nice when there's an idea of what their inspiration is. Any other? Yeah. Depends on the game. I love to be involved as early as possible, but there's not always there. So the question was how early in the game process? Sorry, I have to repeat it for the video. How often in the game process do I like to be involved in the game development? As early as possible is great, because then there's a chance for the design of the game to be inspired by the audio, not just the audio have to match the game. And think of games that you've played where the audio actually played a critical role in either cueing you about something, or the actual puzzles may have been sound puzzles. In Tales of Monkey Island we had actual sound puzzles, right? So if they hadn't brought in the sound design team early, then how would you know how to create and solve those puzzles? Some projects, they just aren't ready for sound for quite a while. That's quite a lot of them. The earliest, the better. It's nice if there's something solid to work against. When things are really in strong revision periods, it's tough to be making audio, because you make something and then all of a sudden everything's gone again. You're like, okay, I'm glad I did all that work. You're going to pay me for this again, right? Because I'm going to do it all again. So, yeah, it's early is nice, but sometimes it's nice to... I like to do a pass at things and then sit back and let them tweak and do stuff and interact with the team, but not necessarily be making a ton of stuff until they're really ready for more stuff. It really just depends on the game. They're all different. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the question is, do I design sounds to be complementary to the music score? It really depends on the game again. I always try to leave space for the music. Sometimes they'll provide me the score and say, here's what you're going to be working against, and I can do my sound design against at least some version of the music before it gets implemented. I'm definitely always thinking about how it's going to relate to each other. For things like Sonic, most likely the composer and the sound designer either were the same person or were so closely working together that they had defined musical scales. That's very, very common, actually, that you'll define a musical scale and key that is that's going to be used within the game. That way you could pretty much do anything and you're never wrong. especially if you do something like a pentatonic. I mean, you can play any note and it'll never be wrong, right? Which is great. It's it's a total cheat, but it's great because you can get away with doing something that's pretty neat. We did stuff like that at LucasArts. The game Pit Droids, the 3 composers all have very different styles, Michael Land and Peter McConnell and Clint Bajakian, and what they decided on the music for Pit Droids was to invest in a new set of synthesizers that all had the same sound set and restrict the whole score to those same sounds and to the same keys. So everything in the game runs at the same tempo, is in the same key, made with the same synths, and I can still listen to them and go, okay, Mike wrote that, Pete wrote that, Clint wrote that, but they all go together, and so they really all match really well. So it was actually a fun little exercise. I think they enjoyed it as much as those of us who were doing the sound design did. I think there was somebody else. Yeah, I'll come back. Do I also create soundtracks? I am not a composer. I was in a former life, but I gave it up for Lent. I do pretty much everything but composition. So I do a lot of production, so recording and mixing. Okay, so the question is, what's the process in doing the recording? Do we work with sample libraries and whatnot, or live musicians, or a combination thereof is really the answer. It, again, is different on every project. So a lot of projects have sample libraries. Most of the composers work with sample libraries. And quite often the composers will mix it themselves when that's the case, because they've basically been sitting with it forever and have been tweaking it as they compose. Sometimes we replace certain parts to make it sound like it's a bunch of live musicians. Like a lot of the Telltale stuff early on was that way. Sam and Max and Wallace and Gromit. We brought in a lot of live musicians, but only like 4 or 5 musicians per episode. So we bring in a drummer with his drum kit, a guy who played a bunch of different reed instruments, a guy who played trumpet, and if we had the budget, we might bring in a string bass player. And with the Wallace and Gromit games, it was all brass because it just needed to sound like Wallace and Gromit. That's all big brass band type stuff, marching band. So yeah, it really depends. And then things like Grim Fandango, we had a 50-piece orchestra in Australia. So, and that was combined with things that had been recorded live 17 years earlier, plus samples that had been updated by Peter McConnell. So he was using newer sample libraries. So like a lot of the percussion stuff was all sample libraries, but it sounds fantastic with the live orchestra. You really just wouldn't even realize. Combination. Yeah. Okay, come back here and then, yeah. So always take a trebuchet. I recorded a trebuchet in Hamar, and it makes very little sound. Let me see where my trebuchet is. See, look at that, trebuchet.
Well, that's how we like out there. Order. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, go!
That's the sound of a trebuchet. There's almost nothing there. Now, maybe he meant a catapult. Yeah. Because a catapult and a trebuchet are not the same. A trebuchet is a big armed thing that flings with people pulling down on a rope or on when a weight is shifted. Whereas a catapult is stored energy and incredibly dangerous, and basically nobody ever used them because they just blow up on you. Yeah, I think everybody's got their own tricks. One of my favorite tricks is the iPad. For making a lot of sound effects. So like I'll go through and I'll just record a bunch of sounds. And no idea where any of this is going to show up. It's just raw source I created while working on a project. It's like, okay, I need a bunch of electronic stuff for interface stuff and I just sit down and have fun for a while, and then drop it all in here, and there'll be just a ton of it. I like the iPad because of the touch interface. There's some really fantastic touch interface synthesizers that I tend not to tell people the names of because they're mine. I don't want anybody else to use them. So you can see if I think a patch is interesting or if I've tweaked it in a certain way, I might record a ton of stuff with it, like this one. You just never know when any of this stuff is going to be useful, so you just make a bunch. I could totally use that for a button click and pretty much anything. It's... in the right context, it's perfect. So, I'll find it again someday. I could know it's this file and still never find that actual sound again because there's another 50 in there around it. Oftentimes I'll go and I'll find something like, ooh, I love that, and I'll copy it, and I'll end up with like 7 of them. And it's like, which one was it? Damn it. Okay. There was somebody over. Yeah. Yes. Do I use synthesizers? Yes. It really depends on what you're working on. Sometimes people don't like it. So for I like to use synths mainly for user interface and for additional layers and things. If I'm going to try and beef something up, I might use a really low frequency synth patch, but I might use just a Thunder Rumble as well. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. Have I worked with binaural? I have never actually done any binaural recording, which is odd because I really love surround. And the recorder I use for recording sound effects, I always record in surround. So if you look in my look in this library of sounds, and you'll see that that's a rear and that's a front channel for surround. Not that there's anything interesting surround there. But sometimes there is. I mean, I can't play it here, obviously, but, I've recorded stuff in the Emanuel Vigeland Mausoleum, and what better place to get surround? I mean, it's just... you guys know about the Emanuel Vigeland Mausoleum? How many people know about that? Stick your hands up. Hi. Okay, yeah, that's about the typical percentage. So, not far from here, you know where Slemdal is, right? Just a few stops up the Tabana. Emanuel Vigeland built himself a mausoleum. It's a 3-story brick building, and it is spectacular, and you should go there. Well, you can record sound in there. Oh, I'm not online. You can record sound in there so long as you aren't like doing flash photography and stuff like that. They won't stop you from recording sound in there. If you're me, you've got access to it when it's not open. So I've gone in there and recorded stuff with some colleagues who have the key. So, which is nice because when there's nobody in there, the place is spectacular. So the room is a 3-story brick building with a ceiling that's curved. It's like a parabola, and it is. It's an enormous space. The whole inside of it is a fresco depicting Emmanuel's kind of warped view of the cycle of birth to death. He's he was kind of the crazy brother of Gustav. And so the room inside is got a 17-second reverb tail. So when you go like that, you hear it for a while. I can give you an example of what this place sounds like. One of the times I was in there, these guys just happened to show up. I was like, best is when somebody closes the door. I have a... Let's see. In here? Yes. It's an amazing space. You should go visit it. It's open on Sundays from, I think, noon to 3. And if you are interested in sound, you have to go there. It's really spectacular. But everybody should go there. Emmanuel wanted people to bow to him, so he built the door really low. And his urn was supposed to be above. There's an urn there, but I don't think his ashes are actually in it. That way you had to bow to him on the way in and out. Yeah. It's a trip. It's very cool. And it's just up the street, so you should go. Other questions? Yeah. Well, I like to name things in a way that I can find them. So if you look here, you'll see everything's pretty much named for what it is. So like Bergen Exterior Neighborhood Park, Bergen Interior Shopping Mall, Bergen Exterior Knusesma Night, Intersection Night. Right, so it's just, I can always go search for something. There's a door buzzer. Just walking through the street, found this door making a weird noise. I'm like, huh, that's cool. So I just tracked it down the street, and I finally found it, and I'm standing there recording it. And while I'm standing there, some guy walks up to go inside and just looks at me like, what the hell are you doing? I live here. Get the hell out of my way. So yeah, the way I archive things is basically by trying to give them great names. My projects I archive to BDR, Blu-ray discs, recordables, because they hold 50 gigs, 46 gigs of data per disc, and that's starting to not be enough. I used to archive to DVD-R, but that definitely stopped being adequate about 8 years ago. Generally, I can fit most projects on 1 or 2 discs, which is nice. And then I usually make a disc and I pull the stuff off of my work drives, and there's usually a copy of it on my server as well, depending on what the project is. Something like, say, the Grim Fandango orchestral score. It's massive. I mean, the archive for that is I think 3 BDRs, because it's orchestra, so there's 28 microphones per cue, and so, you know, plus all the stuff that Peter supplied, plus I have all the original stuff that they, you know, from 17 years ago, because I restored all the archives. Like, I can't keep that on hard drives. I just put it onto discs, and it sits there for a long time. I have binders full of discs. Yeah, unlike the American politician who has binders full of women. Did that make it over here with this stupid politics? Anyway, more questions? Yeah. So my involvement was 2 things. The first thing I did was I restored all the audio archives from DLT tape, because they didn't have anybody else who could do it, and because I had a DLT drive. I never get rid of anything apparently. So I did all the restoration on that, just restoring the data, and then they hired me to do the editing and mixing of the orchestral score. So that was my whole involvement on that project. So it was 30 minutes of orchestral recording, which is awesome. It's a lot of work. Orchestral stuff is just an enormous amount of work. Like I said, there's 28 microphones plus all the stuff that Peter supplies. That stuff's the easy stuff. Although some of those files were, from 17, 18 years ago, they sounded great back then, but when I listen to them now, I go, there's kind of noisy stuff in there. I think I'll clean some of those noisy things out. And so I would go through and clean as much as I could, and sometimes Peter would say, put that back. I like that noise. That noise was good noise. I'm like, okay, sorry. I go one step backwards, and yeah. So generally it was just those two things I did on Grimm. I mean, every project's different, so it's sometimes I get to do voice, sometimes I get to do sound design. There's another one that I just restored for them, but I can't talk about it yet. So, but it's a lot of old tapes. Anyway, yeah. Do we have a workflow for HD audio? So most of the project I'm working with, we're delivering the audio in at 4416 wave, for the dialogue at least. I like to work at 4824, and that's what I put into the project. In Unity we can actually set the settings in Unity for how it's going to compress the audio. So if you want it to be wave, you can try to get away with that, but the programmer generally doesn't let you for very long. So we can make that into OGG files and then choose the compression ratio. It really just depends on the delivery of the game. So if the game's going to be a downloadable delivery, oftentimes they're far more worried about the total size footprint of the download than they are about the total quality of the audio. In fact, we generally lose out to total footprint when it comes to audio, but the images have to look great. Always. Can't sacrifice there. It's. I think on some of the big AAA titles, they're doing a lot more very high resolution audio. There was a game that came out a year and a half ago that they were having bandwidth issues on the PC version. So they shipped it with all uncompressed audio, and the audio I think was all 9624. So the download side was like 48 gigs, which was ridiculous, totally ridiculous. But hey, glad somebody's pushing the envelope on that stuff. But yeah. As far as I'm concerned, we've the quality of the sound files is pretty good these days as compared to what it was when I started. The games the games that were coming out when I first was looking at getting into video games were all 8-bit 22K, so they sounded absolutely awful. The last game I shipped for PlayStation 1 when I worked at LucasArts had an average sample rate of 5.5 kilohertz, but it was 16-bit at least. Well, on the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, you had 2.5 megs of storage per level for all of your audio. And we were so excited when the PS2 came out because we got 16 per level. Yeah. The disk size went from 600 megs to 9 gigs, and we went from 2.5 megs to 16 megs. So nowadays we actually don't fight in those same ways. It's more CPU nowadays more than it is what quality we get to ship it at. So usually we get to make the choice as to how far back we pull the quality. Again, it depends on the project. They're all different. Were there any more questions? I'm happy to answer questions all day. I don't know how long you want to let me answer questions for. Any others? Yeah. I like silly questions. Do I have any suggestions for somebody who's an audio guy and wants to work in games? Yeah. Okay. So the question, I'll just repeat again in case it was too much in parts. Do I have advice for people who are audio people who would like to get into games? Do it. Or it's crazy. One or the other. Audio for games is pretty awesome. When I first started, I was not so interested in working in audio for games because the quality was low. And I have to say, it's a lot more exciting than I ever expected it to be. Probably the best place to start is by working on projects. There are global game jams and other game jams that occur. Get involved, show up. There are almost never audio people at any of those. I've been to a few, and there's never... I'm usually the only audio person, and generally I'm the guy who's teaching everybody else how to get the audio into their game. At the Global Game Jam in January at Vesterdals, there were 3 of us, two composers and me doing sound design. I worked on 6 games in 2 days. I wired up all 6 games. I sound designed 5 of the 6 games. And one of them was for an old Oric computer running on a 6502 chip. So, you learn a ton getting to work in those types of situations. And because there's no doing it wrong, everybody's doing it wrong. They're just trying to do something. It's a great way to just jump in head first. Download Unity. Learn how to get Unity to make things. There's fantastic tutorials online. I actually went. I've been working in Unity for a couple of years now, and I still don't understand half of what it's doing most of the time. And so I just went onto their website and started going through the tutorials. And I did one of the tutorials is called Rollerball, and I just walked all the way through the whole tutorial. And then went, okay, now I'm going to implement sound the way I want to implement sound on it, because there was no sound in it, of course. And so I set it up as a tutorial on how to set up Fabric. Because I wanted to get Fabric to work the way I wanted it to be set up, and then I put that up on GitHub, and then whenever clients come to me saying, so is there something you want us to do? I'm like, here, look at this, set it up like that. Use the code, just make it so I don't have to set that up, and now you guys know what I want. So, find ways to get the software to do the things you want to do. Make projects, invent things. The tools, you can use anything. I mean, honestly, you can make sounds in Audacity. You can work in GarageBand. You can record stuff with your phone. I mean, I actually have sounds in my library that I recorded with my phone because there was a great sound and I didn't have my Zoom on me. You go, well, it's the same as camera phones. The best camera you have is the one that's on you. You might have a fantastic SLR, but if it's not in your hands when you see a great opportunity for a picture, it doesn't matter. The same is true with recording. So just jump in with whatever tools and learn everything you possibly can. Email me if you have questions. Or call me. I mean, I'm around. There is a really good book on the subject, actually. It's called The Essential Guide to Game Audio. It's written by Steve Horowitz and Scott Looney. They're friends of mine. There's a section in there that I wrote for them about dialogue production for games. There's a lot of awesome people who wrote bits for that. It's a really good book, and it's kind of the all-around... It's kind of a textbook on how to do game audio. And they'll even teach you how to use Unity and implement audio in there. I think they use Master Audio and the built-in audio system. Just because it's I know Scott prefers Master Audio, while I prefer Fabric. But... I learned Fabric from Scott. I learned Unity from Scott. I mean, I've known him for 23 or 24 years. And when I needed to jump into a project 2 years ago, I said, I need a crash course. You've been teaching. Can I buy you, can I pay you some money and buy you lunch to teach me how this thing works? So you'll definitely learn a lot if you pick that book up. It's on Focal Press. And you can download it on the iPad, or I think it's on Amazon, and it's everywhere. It's definitely worth it. And then they have they actually have an organization called the Game Audio Institute, which is part of the book, and it's for teaching game audio, different aspects of it. So yeah, I would look into that. Any more questions? Yeah. Is there a way to stay in contact with me? Yes, I usually have a slide about that, and I forgot to make one. Here, I'll make one real quick. If I can... I like the weather. Everybody laughs when I say that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, California weather's a little boring. It doesn't really change ever. No, I just fell in love with Norway and the culture, and then I started getting involved with the games industry, kind of by accident. And yeah, it's growing really quickly. Actually, there are 100 game companies in Norway now. There might, and that number I got like 2 months ago, so it might actually be higher than that now. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, there's a ton of game development in Oslo. Red Thread Games is here, and they also will rent out a desk to anybody who would like to work on site if you need a place to work. And it's just super, super awesome, folks. They're doing Dreamfall chapters. There's lots of meetups there. There's a game dev meetup. Do you guys know about meetup.com? It's not terribly well known by most of the Norwegians, at least in my experience. It tends to be everybody else seems to know about Meetup, but not the Norwegians. It's almost always expats that I find when I go to the meetups. But there's a great thing. Osman, who used to work at Microsoft, he runs a game dev drink thing that meets up at Mesh, and that's usually like once a month or so. There's also the game Spillmakerlaget. There's a group locally that will be meeting, I think on the 9th, 6th. It's on the 6th at the Scotsman. Yep. Everybody can join for free. You should be there. Yes, it is. It's at 6 o'clock at the Scotsman on Wednesday the 6th, and lots and lots of cool people there. And, if you're looking to do audio, it's a good place to be as well, because I can't work on all the games as much as I try. Yeah, and the rest of the games industry here doesn't actually know much about the game jam that happens here, and they probably should. So you guys should become intimately aware with all the other people so that you can get them to come here and join, because game developers will jam pretty much anytime you give them an opportunity. You're like, oh, really? We can make a game? Oh, awesome. Let's make a game. Cool. That sounds like fun. I didn't have a weekend anyway, so there's a global game jam that takes place at Vesterdals. There's a Hamar global game jam as well, which had, I think, over 100 people this year. So, I mean, it's there's the Gathering, of course. You guys all know about that. And the Spiel Expo. There's a lot of game development stuff going on in Norway. And last year, a bunch of games came out from companies that have been working on their titles for a few years and made a huge splash. I mean, this year at the Game Developers Conference in GDC Play, I think 2 game companies from Norway were nominated, were winners of Best in Play. 3 others were nominated. 12% of the GDC Play floor were Norwegian game companies this year. That's not bad for a country that nobody seems to know has a games industry. Shadow Puppeteer from Hamar, from Sarepta Studios, got an award for I think it was best design, most innovative, I think, for Game Connection. This year, it was just announced like a week and a half ago, at Nordic Game Conference, which you should all go to in Malmö. every category had Norwegian game companies nominated, as opposed to last year where I think there were like 2. So I mean, it's a huge deal. I mean, there's a lot going on, and it's going to grow really fast from here. And there's now an organization being set up to be a developer or a publisher for Norway as well, so that game developers here will have resources. Yeah.
One of the big problems with the game development in Norway is the expensive living costs, and that you don't really get more money from developing games here than anywhere else.
Right.
So do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. So the question is, well, it's more of a comment. The problem with being a game developer in Norway is that it's expensive to be here, and it's hard to make money as a new, an indie game developer, and that's true. However, NFE funds pretty much all the games, which is great. And last year the rules changed, so now it's not just a pot of money for films and a pot of money for games. It is a pot of money. And now the films actually have to compete with the games, which is kind of awesome if you think about it, because I think the film industry is going, uh-oh, because there's a lot more people making games now than there probably are making films, and the budgets are a little more reasonable, although they're still pretty damn small. It is, without question, as an indie developer and with these small game companies, it is very hard to make a living, but there are people doing it, so I think it's possible. I mean, as with anything, you have to match your expectations to reality. If I had wanted to be fabulously wealthy and retire by the time I was 40, and own a yacht and things like that, going into game audio was probably not the right direction. But because I'm quite happy to sleep on a small bed and do whatever I have to do to make it by, you just match your expectations to reality. You go, okay, I want to be a sound person or a game developer more than I want to have nice things, perhaps. It's everybody makes those choices, right? So I think it's doable. And, certainly in Norway you can take that risk. I mean, I can't think of a place that's safer to take that risk, honestly. And there's a hell of a close, tight-knit industry here as well. Any other questions? Okay.
And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.